Hi, this is Gayle from BERNINA of Naperville, and welcome to our Fat Quarter Club for March. Now, today I'm going to show you how you can take a very traditional Prairie Point design and convert it to something you can make with your sideways motions or multi-direction stitches on your BERNINA 990, BERNINA 880, or other BERNINA models that have multi-direction stitching. So let's have a look over at our presentation deck that we give you for free. You can just find it in the description of this video or also on our BERNINA of Naperville website, berninaofnaperville.com. And yeah, let's just see how easy this is.
Here's our presentation deck, and this month I'm going to be using the BERNINA 990. Now, you don't have a 990 to make this project, but it sure does make it very easy. As always, if you have stumbled upon this video, but then you forget where you found it or whatever, just don't forget to download the presentation deck in the description of the video, and there we will have a link to it so that you can watch it without trying to search too much we've got like 600 videos on our YouTube channel, so sometimes they can be tricky to find if you don't know what you're looking for. So this month, it's about a new way to look at prairie point. So I thought I would start with, if you're not familiar, what is a prairie point? Well, they are squares of fabric that are folded into triangles and used to embellish quilts. Most often, they are used around the edge of a quilt instead of a binding. Prairie points can be inserted in the seams of a block, sashing, or border to add interest and dimension in the body of a quilt. They can be made in any size, and there are several ways to make prairie points. They can be made individually with squares of fabric folded into triangles and added to the outside border with a facing. Another technique is to make a continuous string of prairie points that are then added to the border, kind of like you would do this right before you bound it or you put the facing on the back. And like I mentioned, there are lots of ways to use the prairie points, and here are just some examples. So you can see here over at the upper right-hand screen that these are the prairie points inserted in between borders. Below are pinwheels that are created with prairie points, and basically it's just a solid piece of fabric that's formed a four patch, but little triangles have gone in the middle. And then, as you can see here in this example, much similarly to my little hot pad that I made, that the prairie points act as the final edge on the item. And I have done this technique that I'm going to be showing you with the multi-direction stitching several different ways. One way you can see was on this little circuits tent pouch. I created this stitch on my machine. This is a multi-direction stitch. I also did it on Bonaparte's little treat bag, where you can see I put prairie points to either side of a zipper. Well, my inspiration came from a pillow made by Hayley over at BERNINA of America. And if you do not have a machine with multi-direction stitching, don't worry. You can simply use your fabric this month to follow the instructions here at the We Also article. So there's a short video that goes along with this, and there is also the step-by-step instructions that you can follow along with if you click on the link to this article. Here's our project. So mine is similar to Haley's. The only difference is I have a little bit more space in between my prairie points than she did. Hers creates more of a scale look where I actually like seeing the linen poke through a little bit more, but it's really up to you how you would like to put this together. And I thought it was perfect for a pillow, but this could be a treatment on a table runner or whatever tickles your fancy. So it's only appropriate that I tell you which Bernina machines have multi-direction stitching. I mentioned my Bernina 990, but also the Bernina 8 series, that's the 820, 830, 880, and 880 plus models, also have the sideways motion or multi-direction stitching. Those are kind of used, back and forth. It means the same thing, really. And then the 780, 790 plus, 790 regular, and the 790 Pro models have this as well. If we dig really deep into the vault, you might remember Bernina 180s, 185s, the 200, and the 730 Artistas. Well, those definitely do multi-direction stitching, but there's a little bit limited functionality with those models compared to our new generation, so I'm not going to really be touching on those. And also, I don't want to forget those of you out there that love your Bernina 1630. Yeah, we're not going to be using those, but maybe you can find some inspiration from this tutorial. Our tutorial is going to focus on the Bernina 990 and the Bernina 790 Plus models, and that also includes the Pro. So those are the ones I'm going to show you. The fabric this month is from Art Gallery Fabrics and from Susie Quilts, who we love, and she's a local Chicago girl. And it is 6 collections from her Evolve collection and 1 piece from Duval. And they go really well in my bedroom, and so I wanted to do something with these fabrics. Now, normally, when we do this fat quarter of the month, we give you all the fabric you need, but for this month, you are going to need to add 1 yard of some sort of coordinating solid or linen for the pillow back and joining the strips. But joining the strips is possible if you want to save the scraps left over from your fat quarters that we're cutting this month. I mentioned that you need to add a yard of fabric, but you're also going to need a number 40C sideways motion foot for your multi-direction machine, and that came with it. So maybe if you don't have it, you lost it. We still sell them, but in general, that should have come with your machine. We're going to be using the standard black bobbin case. And once again, just to reiterate, for traditional sewing machine techniques, just follow Hayley's instructions from the We All Sew article. I'm using Wonderful Confetti sewing thread. It is a 50 weight 3-ply thread, and I'm using a universal size 80 sewing machine needle. You're going to need, as always, rotary cutter, mat, and ruler, an iron with steam. I love my Laura Star Smart U, and I'll just be kind of showing you some other things we might need as we go along the way. Cutting. So from each of your fat quarters, you're going to cut 2 6-inch by width of fabric, or width of fat quarter. And a fat quarter width is about 21.5 inches because a fat quarter is 18 by 21.5 inches. And so those are going to yield you 12 different Prairie Point strips. Then, if you choose to use the prints as your joining strips, you're going to need to cut 2 2-inch strips with the fat quarter. Optionally, if you want the contrast like I did with the linen, you're going to need a yard of fabric, and you're going to cut 6 2-inch strips with the fabric for joining your strips, and not with the fat quarter, it's with the fabric. And then you're going to subcut those into 2 21.5-inch strips. So basically, you'll end up having 12 2-inch by 21.5-inch strips. Then you're going to need a backing for your pillow, and I'm doing an envelope style backing. So you're going to need 2 18.5-inch by 12-inch pieces for that. Let's get to the fabric prep. Here are all of the fabrics that have been chosen for our fat quarter of the month for March, and I kind of arranged them the way that I'm going to arrange that pillow layout that I showed you. So basically, I'm going to take each one of these and I am going to width of a fat quarter, and that is the bolt crease to the selvage edge. I am going to cut from each one strips that are 6 inches wide. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to play around with my machine and get it set up for the special pattern that I want to create in the combi mode. Now that these are cut into the strips, we're going to take them and fold them right sides together like so. And then we want to stitch our combination, centering it right down one of these strips so that we will have a total of 12 different strips. You know I love my 990, so I've been using my 990 in order to kind of design and create different things and whatever. And I discovered this fun way that we could use not only our combination stitches on this machine, but then also using that jumbo stitch that we love. So for instance, I want to select combination mode, and it's that little button that opens right below the foot. And I want to select 10 straight stitches. And then one special thing about the 990 is that I have this group icon right down here where I can select one, select some, or select all. In this case, I want to select all, go into my edit screen, and select edit from the drop-down menu. And I want to change the stitch direction to 135. Perfect. Now, what I want to do is duplicate, and then I'm going to select some. So it's going to be the last 10, and not that one. And now we're going to change the stitch direction to 225. And then, of course, we can save this stitch as Prairie Points. Now, when this stitch is out, this is going to be very small. This is not going to be nearly as big as the Prairie Points I designed. And that's because I selected all, went to my edit screen, and selected Jumbo Stitch at 300%. And now if you wanted, we could save this as Prairie Points Large. And now let's stitch it.
Once we have our stitch set up on our machine and we are ready to go, we are going to line up our 40C foot to just about the edge of our pressed 6-inch strip. And I like to start close to the edge about here. There's a little line on your needle plate, this little guideline right there is kind of a good place to start. And then I also like to get in the habit of pressing the pattern begin button on my machine just to make sure that I'm always starting at the very first stitch.
And stitching these sideways motion or multi-direction stitches, it's really important to keep the sides parallel to the side of the presser foot or perpendicular to the front of your sewing table. Whatever the case is, you just don't want to let it twist and turn and drift. And if you're working on large pieces of fabric, you would draw registration lines parallel to the side of your presser foot.
And that's it. Now we just turn and trim, or trim and turn rather, in that order.
After we've stitched our strip, we want to trim and turn it inside out. And I'm leaving about a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch, but not quite 1/4 of an inch away from the edge here. And you have to make the little cut into the V of the piece and cut the little tip off, but don't cut the stitching. That's very important. So now we can take this piece and just save it for scraps or something. And now we're going to turn this inside out. So we just need to press it. Let's set up a Bernina 790 Pro to do this process. So first of all, on your 790 Pro, we're going to make sure that we pick the number 40 C-foot. And you're going to make sure that you have your 9mm stitch plate on and your feed dogs are up. You may even want to engage the laser on your machine. Then you're going to make sure that you have the straight stitch selected. I have found that the easiest way to do this is just to simply take our straight stitch, open up the edit screen, and select 30 repetitions. And we select 30 because unlike on our Bernina 990, we can't just do 10 and then use jumbo stitch because jumbo stitch is only found on the Bernina 990. Then close out of that and reopen your edit screen. And now select direction 135 and stitch this until it stops. Then touch 225 and stitch this until it stops. And you're just toggling back and forth between 135 degrees and 225 degrees the whole length of your piece. So now we're stitching at 135 degrees right here. The machine is going to come to a stop. Then I'm going to press 225 degrees on the screen, and then I'm going to stitch that direction. And then it's going to come to a complete stop. And now back to 135 degrees. And then to 225. And we just keep doing this back and forth the whole length of our folded strip. On an 880 or 790 plus or other variations of those, you have to do things a little bit differently. And I'll tell you why. That's because when we do our pattern repeat, we can only repeat our patterns up to 9 times, and we need 30. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up one stitch to stitch at 135 degrees, close that, save it in our favorites, change the direction of our multi-direction stitch again, and now we're going to save this stitch in our favorites. And now we're going to open up combi mode and we're going to add the stitch that is 135 30 times. So literally touch this 30 times. And then touch this one 30 times. And now we're going to save this stitch combination. And you can see it right there. And now it's saved on your machine and you can stitch it out.
Well, every so often, this is going to happen to you. You're going to be in the middle of your multi-direction stitching and you're going to run out of bobbin thread, which is what I did. So the first thing I do is wind my bobbin and rethread, and then start with my design at the very first stitch of the design, which is back here. Now I've also got a laser. I'm using my Bernina 990, and I'm turning my laser on, and now wherever that lands at the point is where my stitch is going to start. If I don't have the laser, of course, I will have to turn my hand wheel until the needle is down in that position. But now that we're ready, and there will be a degree of overstitching with this, and that just can't be avoided. And you probably also saw that earlier when I was stitching, I had hover on. Well, I don't recommend hover when we're doing this. It kind of makes it too easy to move your work. So let's just finish up this piece. And you can see there I stopped and my foot is still firmly holding that fabric.
So what we're looking at here are kind of our little rows, a little mock-up of how they're going to go together to make this pillow. So we're going to need something to go in between. And we have this really nice linen that we got at the store, and I've cut this 2 inches wide, which will mean if we're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to have about an inch in between each row. The top row, row number 1, will be kind of aligned at the end of a strip, and the row number 2, which would be an offset row, will be aligned at another part of a strip. So the way that I want you to think about this is if we were to align this piece right here like this on this end, then when we add strip number 2, we're going to measure 2 inches from the bottom edge and set this one in this way. So all odd rows are going to be aligned to the edge, and all even rows will be 2 inches in. But before we do any sewing, I want to clean up our little prairie points a little bit. I want to kind of put these over on the cutting mat and make sure that the distance between the dip and the edge of the fabric is all the same size so that our rows will be nice and straight. So I'm lining that up like so. And now I'm just going to take a ruler, and I want about a 1/4 inch away from the dip. And so pretty easy now. I'm just going to trim like that. And now I have a finished piece. And I'll just repeat for my entire stack of fabric. Once those are all trimmed, we're going to begin stitching. And I'm just going to line my ruler up like this. And I'm going to just make a little dot right there for my second row. So my first row is going to just simply be stitched with the piece right up to the edge right there.
So now I'm just using a 1/4 inch foot, and I'm just going to stitch, keeping the edge of this even with my prairie point.
So I've stitched the first row into place here, and now I want to add my second row. And remember, I made this little dot right there. So not only are we going to align that guy up there, and don't worry, it's falling off the edge here. We're not going to worry about that, but we're also going to need a new strip. So these linen pieces have been cut 2 inches by 21.5 inches. That's about the width of a fat quarter. And our pillow, ultimately, we're going to be trimming it down a little bit. So this is just fine, but we want to get everything stitched together first. So that is measured 2 inches in. And now I'm going to pin this into position so things will stay all together. And then I don't want to get this little floppy row in the way. So then I'm just going to align all of my pieces here and pin. You'll also notice that I'm sewing all of my like rows together, and I'm keeping that kind of ombre effect with this going down the pillow. All right, so now I have 2 rows stitched. Now I am going to skip adding my 3rd row because I widened this linen strip just a little bit, and this is finishing at 3 inches. And if I want to make an 18-inch pillow, I am only going to need 6 of these. So now I'm going to just put this one aside for another project, and then I'm going to choose this piece as our next one. And I've been trimming my pieces as I go rather than all together at one time. And now, once again, we're going to get these little pieces out of the way. And this one will not be offset. This is row 3, so it's going to be lined up over here on the side. Right up to the edge, right there. With another piece of our linen. And now I am just going to repeat myself here as I go all the way down to complete this piece measuring 18 inches. So it's just a matter of marking my beginning here and pinning my little flappy doos back and stitching. And so I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to do 2 prints together, like one print, and that is the same print. So I have another one of these pistachio or matcha color florals, and then we'll switch until the entire pillow is covered. It's complete. It took a little stitching time, as all things do, but now it's time to trim it up. So it's time for me to bring out the big ruler. Look at this one here. So we want this to be 18 and a half-ish by 18 and a half-ish. And I'm going to start by just kind of finding the middle here. So if half of 18 and a half is 19 and a quarter, and I'm just kind of lining it up as best as I can. It got a little higgledy-piggledy, but the overall look and feel of the pillow is going to be fine. So I am going to line it up right here. And so there's our pillow. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to find some coordinating fabric, and I'm going to make an envelope style. So simply cut 2 like 12-inch by 18 and a half-inch pieces and do a fold over hem on it like this. And then we'll just assemble this to our pillow and shove a little form in there. All right, so here's my pillow, and I think it came out great. I really like it. I love using the linen in the background there, and it just seemed to be the perfect neutral background for this. And really, I cut my strips a little wider than Haley did in her blog post on We All Sew. She did 1.5 inch so that there's only like 1 inch in between these two pieces, but I liked spreading it out just a little bit, which means that initially I had cut three 6-inch strips of each of my pieces here, right? Of each of the fat quarter fabrics, but you would have enough left over if you spaced yours out like mine to put this fabric in between to have like a more seamless transition, or under like this fabric you could put the geometric pieces, and then under the geometric pieces could be the floral, just to give some dimension or something like that. But how you sew it together is up to you, but this came out really really cool. And I know that there's some of you out there that are going to notice that, number one, my pillow isn't stuffed very fat because I didn't have a big enough pillow form, but I'll change that, later. I'll make one with some polyfill. But also I didn't have enough of one linen, so this is a little two-tone on the back, but on my bed, you can't really tell. You can't tell. So shh, don't tell anybody. And if you come over, don't flip the pillow over. You know what I'm saying? Okay.
All right, what do you think? Are you going to try it? Are you going to maybe do it traditionally, like in Haley's We All Sew blog post, or are you going to give the multi-direction stitching a try? Now, it is a little trickier on like the 790 Plus and Pro level machines, but I think you can do it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you're making. So don't forget to tag us at Bernina of Naperville on social media. And also, don't forget to check out our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. That's also easy because it's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville. And there you can like, comment, and subscribe. Happy sewing!